So this is work we are doing with Protoy, who presented before, Victor and Adam, who are on the chat, and we'll be happy to answer your questions, and suggestions very welcome. Okay, I need to manage to. Okay, so we think that work from home matters, and what we want to do here is to learn about its implications for urban transportation. So our core data here is going to be what Protoy already well mentioned earlier, which is what I'm calling here this continuously simulated 2017 NHTS, which actually we started querying in 2019, and we've been somewhat continuously querying it until today, and we're looking towards doing that for the foreseeable future. So how does it work? What we're doing is we take all 2017 NHTS trips, which take place in one of the 275 metropolitan areas. And what we're going to do, we know the block group of origin and the block group of destination, and based on trip lengths, what we're doing is basically trying to impute an exact origin and an exact destination. So we're able to do that for about 90+% of the trips. So we end up with close to 500,000 trips. Each trip has been then queried on Google Maps since June 2019, about 600 times each trip. So it's a pretty large number. This is supplemented by 2 million+ trips that we have in 139 cities, which we have randomly designed. And each of those trips has been queried about 100+ times. Then we also have data for another 1,100 world cities. So for each trip instance, we know real-time travel speed, we know uncongested speed, and we know travel distance, and as well travel time, of course. We also collected transit information for these trips at regular intervals of 3 to 6 months. I'm not going to talk more about that today, but we're planning to do some work with that. The main limitation I think we're facing in terms of data is that the NHTS in some US metropolitan areas is reasonably sparse and possibly very unrepresentative, despite the controls we're going to apply. So here's an illustration for, we're just doing some averages here. So this is 8 American cities. The vertical axis is speed. The horizontal axis is hours of the day. And we have 3 lines. So the black line is March to June 2020. So it's usually above, it's faster. And the 2 lines below are 2019 and October to January 2023, which was the latest available, 3 months at the time we did that. So what we can see here is that in some cities like Dallas, speeds went up during COVID, during the height of the pandemic, second quarter of 2020, but then went back down, and today they're undistinguishable from what they were prior to pandemic. Actually, this is pretty spooky, right? Same thing with Miami, close to same thing with Phoenix. Other cities like Chicago, New York, even stronger with San Francisco and Washington, D.C., we can see that speeds today are still somewhat faster than they were in 2019. Some of that is likely to be associated with work from home. San Francisco and Washington, D.C. are 2 of the cities where work from home is the strongest. So let's see what we can do about that. So before I go deeper into that, let me tell you about additional data. So the data, what I showed you was about the price of travel. We also have data about quantities. So for now, we want to exploit Google Mobility Reports that was made available April 2020, March, April 2020 to late 2022. So it's available daily relative to some baseline at the county level in the US, also worldwide for many other places, for 6 different types of trips. We know there are some other sources of data, but they're not freely available, so we need to ask. So we'll try first with the Google Mobility Reports. There's a bunch of data that tells us about work from home with some geography. There's the data by Nick Bloom and Stephen Davis. the American Community Survey with some delays, the American Time Use Survey, a bunch of ad hoc surveys that have been used by Ed and others, LinkedIn, and so on and so forth. We will need also predictors of work from home. So here the BLS has a bunch of local employment data that we can combine with the Deagle and Neyman classification of whether jobs can be done from home or not. We also have a bunch of point of interest, or a very large number of point of interest that we've systematically collected from American cities. There's easily available fine-grained data about COVID cases and lockdowns over the last, whatever, 3-4 years. And we can read also changes in roadway from different layers of OpenStreetMap. So the first thing we can do is just to try to see what's going on with the equilibrium, which is basically the sort of graph I showed you, but on steroids. We're trying to estimate some indices. So the first type of work that we can do, very descriptive, is for a given trip I and some instance at time t that we've queried. We can measure the speed as a function of a trip fixed effect, some time varying trip characteristics, so that's going to be typically, in our case, weather data, and some fixed effects that delta, that we're going to have for the city where the trip is taking place, maybe only part of the city, maybe only the center, where the trip is close enough to the center, or the suburbs. Some period of time during the day, for instance, peak versus off-peak hours, and some period of time that can be a quarter, that can be a month. We think that for some of our cities, we can go down to the week level without any difficulty, given how many observations we have. We can also estimate things slightly more flexibly in first difference, like we do here. The reason is that, you see that here we'll estimate betas for each of trip characteristics instead of imposing a trip fixed effect like before. So we can see whether the changes in speed are more important for trips that take place on highways, trips that have more intersections, and so on and so forth. Then to go deeper into the problem, we can actually try to causally identify the effects of work from home. Sorry, I jumped one slide. This is this one. So what we want to do here is to regress speed again on, what's going on here? So that's the second equation here, on a trip fixed effect, on hour of day fixed effect, and some measure of work from home. The main problem of work from home, if we measure it well directly, is that it's going to be determined simultaneously with speed. We choose to work from home in places probably, very likely, where commutes are more painful. So for that, we want to have a first stage where we're going to estimate, or we're going to predict work from home using, again, what I described before, the Deagle-Neyman data interacted with local employment data. We can also do some Bartik, estimating some regressions for some effects by sector, city sizes, and so on and so forth, and we do a prediction at the city level, where, of course, the city that you're looking at was excluded from the regression. So the worry is that nonetheless, those predictors may be correlated with the error term. For instance, what's absent in my regression is changing road availability, and in places where there's more work from home, maybe they also will take off traffic, a lot of roads for bicycle lanes, restaurants, and so on and so forth. But this can be measured directly from OSM, or by looking at trip distance for the same trip taken at the same time in different periods. We can also worry about road quality. So here again, we have measures of uncongested speed that Google is giving us. We also have measures of trip distance, road distance for that trip that may be changing over time as well if road quality becomes worse or better. And then, of course, the effect in San Francisco of higher speed today may not be work from home, but maybe population leaving San Francisco. So here we have also high frequency population data that we think we can gather. Finally, the most sophisticated analysis that we can do is to try to estimate a congestion elasticity, where this time we're going to regress in the second stage speed in city I, speed for trip I at what time t, again on trip fixed effect, hour of day fixed effect, and the number of trips being taken in the same city at that sort of time and day. The worry is that, of course, again, this is going to be endogenous, but here we can instrument that with, again, predicted work from home, number of COVID cases, and lockdown. So that's going to be instruments that are going to be time sensitive. I'm not quite sure exactly how to handle that at this point. But what's interesting here is that work from home is going to be a predictor of commutes, whereas COVID cases and lockdowns are going to be a predictor of all trips. So the difference between the two is going to allow us to think about induced demand. Note also that through the Google Mobility data, we have a lot of flexibility since Google Mobility is reporting trips for 6 categories. NHTS trips, we also have multiple well purposes, but for those trips, we can separate commutes from other trips, and we can also, given the statistical power that we have, break things down between suburbs and downtowns for each city, focus on specific hours, times of day, and so on and so forth. Try to think about the Monday effects, versus Friday and Wednesdays, and all of those things. So I'm going to stop here so that people have time to react to that.